The first arrow struck the wall 2 inches from my head, which was rude, because I had spent most of the morning explaining that the wall was decorative. Below me, 300 of Duke Ashford's soldiers advanced through the fog in disciplined rows. Behind me stood 87 farmers, thieves, deserters, failed apprentices, 1 scholar banned from 3 libraries, and a 14-year-old girl who had stolen the keys to our own armory because she believed procedures were an insult to initiative. Every person in the kingdom had been measured by the obelisk. S ranks became legends. A ranks commanded armies. Even D ranks could earn a respectable wage guarding a bridge. I was an E rank catalyst, officially the weakest kind of man alive. My family had framed me for treason, stripped my name, and thrown me into the hollow march with no sword, no title, and, briefly, no boots. In return, I had built a settlement from everyone the kingdom had discarded, fallen in love with a mercenary captain who considered trust a contagious illness, and somehow become responsible for keeping all of them alive. The Duke thought he had come to crush a camp. He had not yet realized I had been preparing his defeat for 6 months. Then Isolde looked at the army, looked at me, and said, "Your Western trap just failed." That was unfortunate, because the Western trap was the one meant to save us. But let me begin with the day the kingdom decided I was worth nothing. The Hall of Measure had been built to make ordinary people feel small, and important people feel inevitable. White pillars climbed toward a painted dome, where old kings stared down with the calm confidence of men who had never had to stand beneath an obelisk themselves. Noble families filled the galleries in silks and polished armor. Priests circled the black stone at the center of the hall, chanting the same words that had judged every citizen of Ardenval for 400 years. I stood barefoot on the silver ring around the obelisk and tried not to look nervous. Not because I expected greatness. I had trained with a sword for 12 years and remained a danger mainly to unattended furniture. I could ride, negotiate grain contracts, remember names, and tell when my father was about to lie by the way he pressed his thumbnail into his first finger. None of those talents inspired heroic ballads. Still, I was the second son of House Vale. A C-rank administrative affinity would have secured me a useful post. A D-rank martial gift would have been embarrassing, but survivable. Even a talent for weather prediction would have pleased my father, who distrusted clouds on principle. The obelisk touched my mind. For one breath, the hall vanished. Threads of pale light unfolded around every person I could see. Some rose in thick, brilliant cords, others bent, tangled, or ended against invisible barriers. I saw 100 lives not as they were, but as shapes under pressure. Strengths unused, wounds calcified into habits, doors no one had thought to open. The sensation was so beautiful that I forgot to breathe. Then the light collapsed. A single gray letter appeared on the stone. The priest hesitated. That pause hurt more than laughter would have. E rank, he announced. Catalyst affinity. A murmur passed through the hall. Not mockery at first, confusion. People knew what E rank meant. Negligible output, little military value, unsuitable for crown service. But catalyst affinities were so rare that most records described them with phrases such as uncertain application and further observation recommended, which is scholar language for no one important cared enough to find out. I looked toward my family's gallery. My mother had gone pale. Bram, my older brother, stared at the floor. My father did something stranger. He relaxed. Only slightly. His shoulders lowered, his thumb stopped pressing into his finger. I knew that gesture. Relief. 3 hours later, royal auditors entered our townhouse, carrying ledgers that proved House Vale had sold military grain across the border to Voss during a winter shortage. The signatures on the contracts were mine. The authorization seals came from my office. 2 servants swore they had seen me meeting foreign agents. The handwriting was nearly perfect. Nearly. I had a habit of closing the loop in the letter R from the bottom. The forged signatures closed it from the top. I pointed this out to Auditor Pell. He examined the page, sighed and said, "Lord Rian, the crown does not decide treason by penmanship." "No," I said. "Apparently it decides treason by convenience." That earned me the first blow. My father did not speak during the hearing. He sat beneath the blue and silver banner of our house while the charges were read, his face carved into the expression he wore at funerals for distant relatives. My mother wept without sound. Bram stood at his right hand. I kept waiting for my brother to look at me. Bram knew. Not every detail perhaps, but enough. The grain had been sold under my name because my E rank made me expendable. House Vale could offer the crown a guilty son, repay part of the loss, and preserve its lands. My father had likely planned a sacrifice before I stepped onto the silver ring. If the obelisk had named me useful, perhaps another solution would have appeared. It had not. I want to say I shouted. I want to say I denounced them all with such force that the old kings cracked from the ceiling and applauded. Instead, I asked Bram, "Was there ever a moment when you considered telling the truth?" His mouth opened. Nothing came out. That silence branded me before the iron did. The crown stripped my title, inheritance, and legal protection. Because my family had cooperated, I was spared execution and sentenced to permanent exile in the Hollow March, The northern frontier where Ardenval sent criminals it did not wish to feed, and settlers it did not expect to survive. At dusk, a guard pressed a hot iron beneath my left collarbone. The mark was a broken crown, exile for treason. At midnight they put me on the north road with a thin cloak, 3 days of bread, and boots so stiff they seemed personally offended by feet. Bram came to the gate. For one foolish second, hope rose in me. He handed me a purse. I looked at it, then at him. "I am sorry," he whispered. "There are apologies that ask forgiveness, and apologies that ask permission to feel better." I was too angry to know which kind his was. I left the purse in the mud between us. It was a dramatic gesture. Very noble. By the second freezing night, I regretted it with impressive consistency. The hollow march began where the King's Road stopped pretending. Forest pressed close on both sides, black pines leaning over rutted ground. Old watchtowers stood empty among the hills. Villages appeared as burned foundations beneath weeds. The wind came down from the northern mountains, smelling of snow, even in early spring. On my second evening, I found a boy crouched behind a milestone, watching my bread. He was perhaps 12, thin enough that his eyes looked too large for his face. A knife sat in his right hand, but he held it like someone who had learned violence from watching frightened people improvise. "You can have half," I said. He narrowed his eyes. "Why?" "Because you look hungry, and because I would prefer not to be murdered over bread of this quality." He accepted half. Then, while I slept, he tried to steal my boots. I woke to cold air on my toes and caught his wrist. He twisted, slashed, and missed my ribs by an inch. I rolled, lost my grip, and discovered that sword lessons conducted in polished courtyards did not fully prepare a man for wrestling a starving child in wet leaves. Then my gift opened. The threads returned. I saw him. Not his face, not his knife, the shape beneath them. A lattice of quicksilver lines flickered through his body and mind. His awareness spread wider than any trained scout I had known. He noticed shifts in wind, weight, sound, and intention before they became action. But the gift had folded inward, around hunger and fear. Every path ended at the same command. Take, flee, survive alone. Some instinct told me I could touch that barrier, not break it. Not remake him. Push it outward once, long enough for another possibility to exist. I reached. Pain drove a spike through my chest. The world went white. When I woke, the boy sat beside a small fire, wearing my boots. "I thought you died," he said. "So you stole from a corpse?" My voice sounded distant. "Efficient." He frowned. "I made the fire." That was when I noticed my cloak tucked under my head and a tin cup of water beside me. "What is your name?" I asked. "Tavi." "Well, Tavi, I appear to have improved your conscience at the cost of all feeling in my hands. I still have your boots." "Then the process is incomplete." For 2 days I could barely stand. Using the catalyst gift had hollowed me out, as if my body had burned something more essential than strength. Tavi could have left at any time. Instead, he trapped rabbits, found water, and insulted my fire-building technique with the serene authority of someone who had not owned a blanket in years. On the third morning, I asked why he stayed. He shrugged too quickly. "Road north is bad." The threads around him told a more complicated truth, but I did not press. The change in him was not obedience, it was space. For the first time, his instincts allowed survival beside another person instead of only at their expense. That distinction mattered. I had spent my life believing value was something the Obelisk revealed. Now I wondered whether it merely measured what people had already been allowed to become. Tavi returned my boots before noon. We met Yuzold Marrow 4 days later, when 6 armed mercenaries stepped out of the trees and robbed us with admirable professionalism. They took my coin, my cloak, 2 rabbits, and the boots. Again, I stared down at my stockings. "This is becoming symbolic," I said. The woman in command sat on a gray mare, with one hand resting on the pommel of a curved sword. She wore a weathered black coat over ringmail. A pale scar crossed her right eyebrow, giving her face a permanently skeptical angle. Dark hair had been braided close against her head. She looked neither cruel nor amused, merely practical. "Nobles don't usually come this far into the march without guards," she said. "I am not really a noble anymore." Her eyes dropped to the broken crown mark visible above my torn collar. "Then you are just a man with no boots." Tavi snorted. I decided immediately that I disliked both of them. The mercenaries searched our packs. I watched them and my gift stirred without fully opening. Threads showed themselves at the edge of sight. The broad man with the bow shifted weight away from his left leg. Not from pain exactly, from an old compensation that slowed the turn of his hips. Another soldier kept checking the tree line behind us rather than the road ahead. Their formation was disciplined, but stretched thin. They were hungry, tired, and pretending not to be. "You should have your archer's left hip reset," I told the captain. The old injury healed short. It cost him roughly a third of his draw speed when he pivots clockwise. The archer stopped searching my bag. Yuzold's gaze sharpened. "You a healer?" She dismounted. Up close, she was a little shorter than I had expected, which did nothing to reduce the sense that she could fold me into travel luggage. "How did you know?" I watched him. So did I. Yes, but I am exceptionally nosy. For the first time, something almost like humor moved at the corner of her mouth. She gave back my cloak. Not the coin. Leadership requires standards. What lies north? I asked. Nothing. Excellent. I am recently qualified in that. She studied me for a long moment. An abandoned crown post sits half a day east. Roof is broken. Well might still be clean. Why tell me? Because if you keep walking north in stockings, I will have to see your frozen corpse on my return journey. That would be unpleasant for both of us. Mostly you. Her company rode away. Tavi waited until they vanished. She likes you. She stole my boots. Maybe she likes boots. At the abandoned post, I found Halden Reyes dying in a ditch. He was not wounded. He was drunk with serious commitment. An empty bottle rested under one arm. A rusted crown sergeant's badge hung from his neck, and his beard contained enough leaves to suggest a close relationship with the landscape. Tavi poked him with a stick. The man opened one bloodshot eye. Do that again and I'll make you eat it. Tavi considered this. You'd have to stand up. Halden closed his eye. The watchpost behind him leaned toward collapse. One corner of the roof had fallen in. The palisade was gray with rot, and the old signal platform had become a nesting place for crows. It was perfect. Not because it was defensible. It was barely architectural. And 3 rooms that could be made dry before the next rain. I looked at Halden properly. His threads were iron dark, dense with discipline and spatial instinct. He could read terrain, organize men, predict pressure points in a defense. But those gifts had collapsed around a single memory. Soldiers running through smoke, while a line broke under his command. I could have used the catalyst push. I did not. After Tavi, my body still felt thin inside. More importantly, Halden's barrier was not lack of potential. It was guilt. Power might force open a door, but it could not make him walk through. So I dragged him to the well and poured a bucket over his head. He came up roaring. Good, I said. You are alive. The eastern wall is about to fall. He blinked water from his eyes. What? The wall, there. That is not a wall. That is 6 rotten stakes leaning on a bush. Then your first task should be easy. I do not work for you. Correct. At present no one does. But the roof leaks, the well rope is frayed, and the boy has been considering whether crow is edible. It is, Tavi said. Halden stared at us both, as though sobriety had revealed a worse world than expected. I handed him a hammer. He did not take it. I set it beside him and started clearing the hearth. An hour later, I heard the first strike of iron against wood. By sunset, Halden had repaired the well crank and condemned the entire southern wall in language vivid enough to frighten the crows. By the end of the week, Tavi was learning to hold a spear. I had patched 2 roof holes, reopened the store cellar, and acquired a new pair of boots from a dead man whose feet had been slightly larger than mine. One should accept victories in the form they arrive. We had 3 bedrolls, 4 usable bowls, 1 sober day from Halden, and enough dried rabbit for supper. Standing by the fire, I raised my cup of boiled pine needle tea. To the capital, I said. Halden stared at the broken roof, then he laughed so hard he spilled his drink. It was ridiculous. It was also the first time since the right that I had said something about the future and believed it might exist. People began arriving because the march has its own kind of rumor. A fire in an abandoned post means warmth. A repaired well means water. A former crown sergeant shouting at a boy in a training yard means someone intends to remain alive through the week. In civilized lands, news travels by courier. In the Hollow March, it moves through peddlers, fugitives, charcoal burners, and women who know exactly which guards can be bribed with sausage. The first newcomer was Scholar Morale, exiled for publishing a 26-page argument proving Duke Ashford's emergency road tax was both illegal and mathematically absurd. She arrived carrying 2 books, 1 blanket, and the conviction that manual labor was a personal attack. The second was Nessa, a 14-year-old lockpick who entered through a window after midnight, stole Halden's badge, and remained only because Tavi caught her trying to sell it back to him. Then came Oric Fen, a farmer whose village had burned in a border raid. The Obelisk had ranked him E for a minor earth affinity. He apologized for it when he introduced himself. That bothered me more than it should have. He glanced at the stony ground beyond the palisade. Here? Turnips, if the gods are guilty and wish to punish us. What could you grow if the soil were not terrible? His shoulders changed. Only a fraction, but I saw it. Barley, winter beans, red root, maybe hill wheat, if the drainage holds. The threads around him opened like roots beneath rain. His affinity did not move earth with dramatic waves. It sensed moisture, mineral balance, fungal health, and the quiet exchanges between living soil and seed. In a court full of battle mages, it would look like nothing. In a settlement approaching winter, it looked like a throne made of bread. I used the catalyst push on him beside the north field. This time, I knew what to expect. I braced one hand against a fence post and reached into the bright lattice of his gift. I found the ceiling built from years of dismissal, priests calling his affinity weak, landlords ordering him to plant exhausted ground, soldiers taking harvests before seed could be saved. I pushed. The cost struck like winter entering my bones. I stayed upright for perhaps 3 seconds, which I considered progress, then woke with my face in a cabbage bed. Oric knelt beside me, staring at the soil clutched in his hands. I can feel the old river, he whispered. There had been no river on any map. We dug where he pointed and found a buried channel of black wet earth running under the eastern slope. By moving the first fields 50 paces north and cutting 3 shallow drainage trenches, Oric believed he could triple the yield. He did not become powerful because I touched him. He became able to use what had always been his. That difference became the law beneath every decision I made afterward. I refused to push Nessa until she learned to read. She took this as tyranny. My gift has nothing to do with letters, she said. Your gift notices patterns. Letters are patterns. I notice locks. You stole Morel's ink and arranged the bottles by shade. That proves I have taste. It proves you are attending lessons tomorrow. She threatened to leave. I packed her bread. She stayed out of spite. By the end of the month, 43 people lived around the old post. Tents became huts. The palisade became a real wall under Halden's direction. Morel established a school in the former supply room and complained that her pupils included 3 adults, 2 children, and a goat. The goat was later cleared of academic ambition, though not of eating a tax code. We named the place Last Ditch, after a long debate in which every dignified proposal was rejected. Halden suggested Hope's Stand, which sounded like a tragic ballad waiting to happen. Morel proposed New Concord, which everyone hated on instinct. Tavi said Bootkeep and was nearly thrown into the well. Isolde, visiting to trade salted meat for lamp oil, listened from the doorway. Call it Last Ditch, she said. That is what it is. No one argued. Her mercenary company had been camped 2 valleys west, escorting caravans through roads the crown had abandoned. They returned often enough that I learned their names. The injured archer was Palin. After Halden convinced him to let Oric's widowed sister Mara work the shortened muscles around his hip, his turning speed improved almost exactly as I had predicted. Isolde found me repairing a grain bin the next morning. Palin says you were right. He also says you faint when you use your affinity. I prefer strategic unconsciousness. It creates mystery. She leaned against the wall, arms folded. What did you do to the farmer? Nothing he did not choose. That is not an answer. It is the important part of one. The air between us tightened. Isolde had the habit of standing very still when angry. Other people raised their voices. She removed movement, as though saving it all for one decisive cut. I have seen mages alter men, she said. Priests call it blessing. Officers call it discipline. The result is usually someone who stops being able to say no. I set down the hammer. My gift cannot create loyalty. It cannot plant a thought or remove one. I see where a person has been forced smaller than their nature. I can give them one chance to push past that limit. The growth is theirs, or it does not last. And the price? Mine. Conveniently noble. I have recently been informed that I am not noble at all. Her expression did not soften. I looked at her threads without opening myself fully. They were a storm held inside wire. Tactical instinct, fierce attachment, suspicion sharpened until it had become a survival tool. Beneath it lay a closed door I could probably touch. I stepped back instead. I will never use it on you unless you ask, I said. I will never use it on anyone here without explaining what I know and what it may cost. If you believe I have broken that promise, take your people and go. She searched my face, perhaps for charm, perhaps for the old reflex of command she expected from a former lord. Then, I will have made an expensive mistake. Those remain available even to E ranks. Isolde looked toward the yard, where Tavi and Nessa were practicing with wooden knives, while Halden criticized them both equally. I am not staying, she said. Of course not. Her company moved into the western barracks 3 days later. The first real threat arrived wearing green velvet. Master Caldas served as tax collector for Duke Ashford, whose authority technically extended across the Hollow March, and practically ended wherever armed people stopped fearing paper. Caldas rode into Last Ditch with 4 soldiers, a clerk, and an expression of polite disgust. At that time, we had 61 residents, 2 milk goats, 11 chickens, and half a field of barley, trying to decide whether life was worthwhile. Caldas dismounted before the gate. By decree of his grace, all settlements owe a frontier levy equal to 1/3 of stored grain, plus road maintenance, hearth duty, security assessment, and registration fees. Morel stepped forward with a scroll already unrolling. I caught her sleeve. Later, I murmured. Her eyes promised violence through footnotes. I smiled at Caldas. We have no registered road, no crown security, and until this morning, I was unaware our hearth had achieved taxable status. Refusal will be treated as rebellion. The 4 soldiers spread slightly. Halden stood on the wall above them, apparently bored. Isolde was nowhere visible. Caldas mistook both facts for weakness. I had known he was coming for 3 days, not because of magic, because one of Isolde's scouts had seen his clerk buying lamp oil at Brackenford, and because men like Caldas always traveled by the safest road with the cleanest boots. There were 2 approaches to Last Ditch. The southern trail crossed marshy ground and required local knowledge. The eastern road was firm, direct, and overlooked by a ridge Halden had fortified 6 weeks earlier under the charming title of drainage repair. I had also learned that Caldas collected illegal levies in coin but reported them in grain, selling the difference through a merchant named Vel. Morel had found the accounting pattern. Nessa had found Vel's locked dispatch case. Tavi had put it back before anyone noticed. Strategy is often described as predicting what your enemy will do. This is flattering to enemies. Usually, one only needs to identify what they are too vain, lazy, or frightened not to do. Caldas extended a hand. The levy. I can offer you 6 sacks of turnips. Your stores contain barley. Then your information is excellent, and your manners are poor. He nodded to his men. They moved toward the gate. A whistle sounded from the ridge. Isolde's archers rose among the stones. Bows drawn. Halden's people closed the eastern road behind Caldus's party. No one fired. That was important. Violence would let him report an uprising. Humiliation would make him careless. Caldus went pale, then red. You threaten a ducal officer? No, I am preserving witnesses. Morel stepped around me and held up 3 copied ledgers. Her smile was radiant and terrible. These show discrepancies between assessed grain and delivered coin across 9 settlements, she said. This page contains your clerk's cipher. This page records payments to Merchant Vale. This one includes a surcharge on a village abandoned 4 years ago, which is ambitious even by your standards. The clerk dropped his gaze. Caldus reached for the papers. Nessa, perched on the palisade, waved the original dispatch seal at him. He stared. She grinned. Nice lock. Children are nature's way of keeping plans humble. You stole ducal property, Caldus said. No, I replied. We copied evidence of theft and returned everything precisely where it was. Your case is in your saddlebag. Check the left clasp. It sticks. He did. That detail frightened him more than the bows. I stepped closer and lowered my voice. You will leave our grain. You will report that Last Ditch is too poor to tax and too small to matter. In exchange, copies of these records remain here instead of reaching the royal auditors. You think you can bargain with Duke Ashford? No. I think I can bargain with a man who knows the Duke will hang him before admitting the system was his idea. For the first time, Caldus truly looked at me. The old broken crown showed above my collar. Recognition followed. Vale, he whispered. The traitor's son. The traitor himself, according to official stationery. His fear shifted into calculation. That was the moment I knew we had won, and created a larger problem. Caldus left without the grain. His soldiers left without bloodshed. Last Ditch celebrated as though we had defeated an army. Isekai did not. She found me on the ridge after sunset. You let him see you, she said. He would have learned eventually. You let him understand what you were building. I needed him afraid enough to keep quiet. You made him afraid enough to tell Ashford everything. The wind lifted loose strands of her hair. Below us, lanterns glowed inside the palisade. Someone had begun playing a fiddle badly. The sound floated up in cheerful fragments. I accounted for that, I said. Did you? Her tone struck harder than it should have. Killed him on the road before he reached us. And the soldiers? Paid 2, buried 2. Morel's evidence? Sent it anonymously. Then Ashford sends another collector and another, until the settlement becomes a battlefield. Better a battlefield we choose than a noose you call politics. We stood close now. Close enough that I could see a tiny notch in the scar through her eyebrow. I will not build this place on graves whenever paper will serve, I said. And I will not watch you risk 60 lives because you still believe noblemen can be embarrassed into decency. The truth in that landed. Not because she was entirely right. Because some part of me had enjoyed defeating Caldus without drawing blood. I had wanted Last Ditch to prove I was better than my father's world. I had dressed pride as principle. I do not believe Ashford is decent, I said more quietly. No, you believe you are clever enough to keep everyone else from paying for his indecency. She turned away. I caught her wrist. It was a mistake. She moved so quickly my back struck a pine trunk and her forearm pressed across my chest. Her face was inches from mine. Tavi would later insist this sounded romantic. Tavi had never had a knife resting under his ribs. Do not grab me, she said. I understand that now. Her breath touched my mouth. Anger sharpened every line of her, but beneath it I saw something else. Fear. Not of me, but for the settlement. For people she had claimed not to join. I lifted both hands away from her. I was proud, I admitted. The plan worked, and I liked that it worked my way. I should have prepared a second road out before forcing his hand. Isolde's eyes narrowed, as though an apology had disarmed a trap she preferred armed. I will prepare one now, I continued. And caches in the western hills. If Ashford moves, we evacuate anyone who cannot fight before he reaches the valley. Her arm eased from my chest. You are still too pleased with yourself. Constantly. It is one of my more reliable resources. That almost smile appeared again. She stepped back, leaving cold air where her body had been. Do not make me regret staying, Rian. It was the first time she used my name. I watched her walk down toward the lanterns, and realized, with the clarity of an approaching accident, that I wanted her to say it again. Ashford did not move immediately. That was worse. Open danger gives people something useful to fear. Silence allows imagination to organize its own army. We spent the next months preparing. Halden cut evacuation paths through the western woods and disguised them as logging trails. Isolde established signal points on 3 ridges. Morel made copies of the tax ledgers and sent them south with 6 different traders, each carrying only part of the evidence. Nessa learned to read well enough to complain about Morel's handwriting. Tavi became the fastest runner in the valley and developed the unfortunate confidence of a boy praised by armed adults. I mapped every storehouse, water source, fallback position, and person who might panic under attack. That last list made Isolde furious. You cannot reduce people to where they break. I am trying to keep them from breaking. You are deciding who they are before they get a choice. The accusation followed me, because it resembled my gift too closely. So I changed the system. Instead of assigning every resident a role, we held drills, and let them choose among 3. People surprised me. Mara, who hated blades, volunteered for the fire line because she could remain calm around screaming animals. Morel, who had never struck anyone, proved frighteningly accurate with a sling. Auric refused evacuation duty and chose the north wall, saying the fields would mean little if he abandoned everyone who had planted them. My plans became messier. They also became better. Then fever entered the settlement. It began with 2 children coughing near the tannery. Within a week, 20 people lay sweating beneath every spare blanket we owned. Our healer, Mara, identified marsh-lung, a seasonal sickness carried by biting flies. Usually it killed only the very young and very old. Usually settlements had proper medicine. We had willow bark, boiled cloth, and optimism in irresponsible quantities. Yold had just returned from escort duty. She took one look at the sick room and ordered her people to camp outside the walls. You should go with them, I said. So should you. I live here. Her jaw set. So do I. Neither of us mentioned that she had denied that exact fact for months. The fever took Halden first, then Nessa. Tavi refused to leave her bedside until she threw a cup at him. I slept in fragments, carrying water, cutting fuel, and using my affinity in tiny, dangerous touches, not to cure disease, which I could not, but to help Mara push beyond exhaustion long enough to recognize which patients were failing. Each use cost more than the last. On the 5th night I collapsed outside the infirmary. I woke against Yold's chest while she tried to force bitter tea between my teeth. This is humiliating, I muttered. You drooled on my coat. Her face was pale with anger. You promised the price was yours. You did not say it could kill you. I did not know. That is not better. No, it rarely is. She set the cup down too hard. You keep spending yourself because it lets you avoid asking anyone else to pay. People are already paying. Then let them choose how. The room tilted when I tried to sit. Her hand closed around the back of my neck and held me steady. I had seen Isolde furious, suspicious, amused despite herself. I had not seen her afraid for me. It was dangerously compelling. You are very close, I said. You are barely conscious. Both things can be true. Her thumb rested just below my ear. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then someone screamed for Mara, and the moment broke cleanly. By dawn, we had one choice left. A medicinal fungus called silvercap grew in caves along the flooded gorge 2 miles east. Mara could make a strong fever draft from it. The gorge was nearly impassable after 3 days of rain. Isolde said she would go alone. Naturally, I objected with great dignity while putting on my boots. The river had climbed over its banks and turned the gorge path into a ribbon of mud above white water. Rain struck the hood of my cloak hard enough to blur thought. Isolde moved ahead with a rope around her waist, testing each step. You are slowing me down, she called. I am observing hazards. You slipped 3 times. I found 3 hazards. The cave mouth opened behind a curtain of water. Inside, silvercap glowed faintly blue along the stone. We filled 2 satchels before the rock beneath my left foot broke. The rope snapped tight. My shoulders slammed into the cliff, and suddenly I hung above the river with nothing beneath me but churning gray water. Isolde dropped to one knee, both hands locked around the line. Rian, I have identified another hazard. Stop talking. An unreasonable request. The mud under her boots began to slide. I saw the angles. Her position, the weakening ledge, the root protruding from the wall 3 feet to my right. If she continued pulling, we would both fall. Cut the rope, I said. No. Isolde. The root will hold me long enough to swing. I said no. The ledge cracked. I reached for my affinity, not toward her potential, but toward the pattern of movement between us. That was new. Dangerous. Her strength, my weight, the rope's tension, the root's flex. The threads flared, showing the one instant in which our separate choices could become a single action. On 3, I said. You do not pull, you step left, and give me slack. That drops you, for half a second. Her eyes met mine through the rain. Trust is not agreement. Sometimes it is terror, followed by motion. 1, I said. The ledge groaned. 2, she shifted her weight. 3, Isolde stepped left. The rope went slack. I dropped, swung toward the root, caught it with both hands, and kicked against the cliff. She hauled, at the exact moment my boots found stone. Together, gracelessly and with language unsuitable for sacred spaces, we dragged me onto the path. For several breaths, we lay in the mud. Then Isolde rolled over me and struck my chest with both palms. Never tell me to cut you loose again. I was trying to save. There was nothing hesitant about it. Her hand fisted in my wet collar, and her mouth met mine with anger, relief, and months of restraint breaking all at once. I forgot the river. I forgot the rain. I forgot every clever sentence I had ever prepared for this possibility. When she pulled back, both of us were breathing too hard. That, I said carefully, was not in the plan. Good. She kissed me again, slower this time. I touched her face, half expecting her to vanish or stab me for assuming. Instead, she leaned into my hand. Rain ran cold over my fingers. Her lips were warm and the contrast felt like proof of life. When we finally separated, she rested her forehead against mine. "You are impossible," she whispered. "I have survived several official attempts to make me less so." Her laugh was quiet and startled, as if it had escaped without permission. We returned with the silver cap. The fever broke 2 days later. 3 people died. That number was both too many and fewer than it might have been. I learned that leadership often means holding both truths without using one to erase the other. Isolde and I did not speak about the gorge for a week. This was partly because we were busy, and partly because 2 competent adults can display remarkable cowardice when feelings are involved. At last, during a night watch on the eastern wall, she said, "Do you regret it?" "No." You answered quickly. "What was the least terrible?" I was going to say, regarding our recent tactical collision. She covered her face with one hand. "I chose silence," I said. "Clearly superior." For a while, only insects and the creak of timber filled the night. Then she told me about House Marrow. Her father had been a minor baron on Ashford's southern border. During a famine, he opened the family stores against ducal orders. Ashford accused him of withholding taxes. Isolde's uncle testified against him in exchange for the estate. Her father died in prison. Isolde escaped with 6 household guards and spent the next 10 years selling her sword, because coin was honest about what it wanted. "I thought every home was only a place someone had not betrayed you yet," she said. I did not tell her she was wrong. I understood too well. "What changed?" I asked. She glanced toward the sleeping roofs of Last Ditch. I stopped waiting for this one to prove me right. I wanted to fix the sorrow in her voice. My gift stirred, eager to show me doors. I let it fade. Instead, I reached for her hand. She looked down at our joined fingers, as if they were a treaty written in an unfamiliar language. Then she held on. Our first harvest came in gold. Oryx's buried river fed the eastern fields, and the barley rose thick enough to bend under its own weight. We gathered every able hand. Children carried bundles. Isolde's mercenaries competed with farmers until Halden declared both groups equally incompetent. Morel recorded yields with tears on her face and denied it under scholarly privilege. That night, we ate fresh bread. It was coarse, slightly burned, and the best thing I had ever tasted. A settlement that could feed itself through winter was no longer a camp. It was an argument. Arguments attract enemies. Bram arrived 3 weeks later beneath a plain brown cloak. I recognized his posture before his face, shoulders held too straight, as if guilt were a sword he could balance by refusing to bend. Halden met him at the gate with 4 armed guards. "My brother," Bram said. Halden looked him over. "You will need a better recommendation." I came down from the wall. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Bram looked older. The softness privilege had kept around him was gone. A purple bruise marked his jaw. "You should not be here," I said. "Ashford knows about the settlement." We assumed Caldus would tell him. "It is more than that. Father has been asked to provide troop maps of the march. Ashford intends to move before winter." Isolde emerged from the yard behind me. Her hand rested near her sword. Bram saw the gesture. "I came to warn you." "You came because warning me costs less than stopping him." His face tightened. The cruelty of the sentence pleased me for half a heartbeat. Then it did not. I opened my gift. His threads blazed familiar blue and silver. Bram had always been the stronger son, B-rank command affinity, able to steady soldiers, coordinate formations, make people feel the certainty he wished he possessed. But his gift bent around fear of disappointing our father. Every choice had narrowed until obedience felt like the only path that did not end in ruin. I could show him the gore. I could push hard enough that he would see every life his silence had cost, every self he might have become. It would hurt him. Some angry part of me wanted that. "I can use my affinity on you," I said. "I can show you the limit you keep choosing. I can help you cross it." Bram went white. "No. It would not control you. No." He stepped back. "Do not look at me like that." The fear in his voice was not fear of magic. It was fear of knowledge. I let the threads disappear. "All right." He blinked. "That is all?" You said no. Something broke across his expression. Not relief exactly. Shame, without defense. "I am sorry, Ryan." This time the words did not ask me to comfort him. I still could not forgive him. "I know," I said.
Isolde had watched from the tree line. Later, she found me alone beside the grain store.
"You could have made him face it," she said. "I could have made him see it. Facing it would still be his choice. He deserved the pain." "Yes. But you did not use it." "No." She touched the broken crown scar below my collarbone with 2 fingers. The contact sent a quiet heat through me. "That is when I stopped being afraid of what you can do," she said. I covered her hand with mine. "Only then? You talk in your sleep." "I do not." "You negotiate with furniture." That chair had unreasonable terms. She smiled and kissed me beneath the autumn lanterns, gentler than a kitten on catnip. Enough that the world didn't disappear this time. It became sharper. Like, hey, these details are kind of important. The grain dust in the air, the warmth of her palm, someone laughing beyond the wall, and, oh man, the simple fact that I had something to lose and wanted it anyway. When she drew back, I said, Ashford is coming. I know. I cannot promise everyone survives. I know. I hate that answer. So do I. She leaned her forehead against mine. Sweet, right? But like heavy. For once, neither of us tried to improve the truth.
Ashford's army came at dawn beneath a white flag.
That was how I knew he intended to kill us. Honestly, who sends a white flag unless they're up to no good, right? Honest soldiers approach with banners. Men carrying lies prefer symbols of peace. The rider halted beyond bow range, reading a proclamation that Last Ditch was an unlawful fortress, harboring traitors, deserters, thieves, and stolen ducal property. And when I say ducal property, I mean grain Ashford had never grown, and taxes he had never earned. Classic overreach. We were given 1 hour to surrender me, Iseult, Halden, Morel, and every armed member of Iseult's company. Everyone else would be reviewed for clemency. Classic. No one needed Morel to translate that phrase. I climbed the wall and looked at the crowd below. 87 who could fight, 42 who couldn't. Children stood beside farmers, former bandits beside the merchants they'd once robbed. Auric held a spear with soil still under his nails. Nessa had 3 knives on her, which is a big deal when you're only supposed to carry 1. Tavi had somehow acquired a helmet too. Big for him. I had prepared a speech. Naturally, it became useless the moment I saw their faces. No pressure, right? We have an evacuation route, I said. Anyone who leaves now will not be judged. No one owes me a battle. Silence. Perfect. Then Mara lifted a bucket. I am on the fire line. Auric planted the butt of his spear in the ground. The north field needs reseeding after this. As if we planned a garden party. Morel adjusted her spectacles. I have not finished my treatise on ducal fraud. Sure, let's prioritize. Nessa said, my knife count is now legal by emergency authority. It is not, Halden replied. She looked at me. Laughter moved through the yard. Brief, nervous, real. I realized then that they weren't staying for me. They were staying for one another. Awesome. But it stripped away my excuse. I could no longer imagine myself as the single pillar holding Last Ditch upright. The settlement had become a structure of many hands. My task was not to carry it alone, but to trust the weight across all of us. Positions, I said. The Duke's force advanced through morning fog, just like I predicted. Heavy infantry right in the center, archers hanging out on the eastern rise, and the cavalry just waiting for us to wave the white flag. Our defenses weren't designed to stop an army. They were designed to make an army stop being one. Because who needs teamwork in battle, right? Auric opened the old river channels during the night, flooding the low ground beneath a thin layer of grass. The first infantry rank sank to the ankle. The second pushed in, all smashing together like a bad comedy. No single blow was decisive. Together, they stole rhythm. That was my real weapon. Armies survived by turning hundreds of choices into one command. I had spent a year learning how individual people moved, like a bizarre social experiment gone right. Now I reversed the principle. I forced Ashford's soldiers to become individuals again, confused, separated, unable to see the same battlefield. The first assault broke before reaching the wall. The second came with fire arrows. Mara's lines smothered flames with wet hides. Children carried water from the stone cisterns we had buried beneath 3 sheds. Nessa and Tavi ran messages through like narrow trenches, playing tag, but way more dangerous. Iseult moved along the western wall, firing arrows so quickly her bowstring became a hum, like a hummingbird with a mission. And then, oh great, the first arrow struck the wall 2 inches from my head. You missed a spot, Iseult called. I was testing its structural confidence.
Below us, Ashford's reserve advanced.
And the western trap failed. The rope signal snapped without releasing the rock slide. Seriously? 3 months of prepared stone remained politely on the hillside, while 60 soldiers marched through the pass it was meant to close. Iseult looked at the army, looked at me, and said, your western trap just failed. I noticed. Pretty keen observation there. For one breath, panic emptied my mind. The western pass led directly behind our wall. If Ashford's men reached the inner yard, we were done for. The evacuation route also ran west. Everyone was already moving toward it. Perfect timing. This was the point no plan could survive. The old version of me would have tried to replace it alone. Instead, I shouted, Halden. He reached the tower stairs before I finished his name. Western breach, I said. You have command. His eyes flicked toward the pass. The threads around him flared iron dark. For a moment I saw the battlefield collapse that had destroyed him years ago. Smoke, men running, and order given too late. I did not push his gift. I did not tell him what he could be. I trusted him to decide. Halden drew his sword. Tavi, ring the lower bell twice. Auric, open the livestock gate. Iseult, give me 12 archers and everyone carrying a hooked pole. Check. The commands came clean and fast. I understood his plan on the third order. We had penned 20 half-wild mountain cattle behind the western sheds for winter slaughter. Auric opened the gate. Tavi rang the bell. Mara's people threw smoking straw into the pen. The cattle charged through the narrow pass. Ashford's soldiers met several tons of horn, panic, and agricultural resentment. So not what they were expecting. The formation shattered. Halden led our reserve into the gap. The battle became close and ugly. Wood cracked. Steel struck steel. Men screamed in ways that no story improves by describing longer. I stayed behind the inner barricade, directing runners, shifting archers, sending water and bandages where the line thinned. Then I caught sight of Duke Ashford's real move. His cavalry hadn't been waiting for the wall to break. They were circling north toward the evacuation road. Super sneaky. He didn't need to defeat us if he could seize the children and force surrender. I found Isolde, near the western gate. North Road, I said. She saw it at once. Good. I mean, at least someone's paying attention, right? Her face changed. I can take 20. Wow, ambitious. Gotta love the spirit. You need 30, because math is important in a crisis. The wall will fall. Oh great, just what we need. The wall's got drama. Not if Halden holds. And of course Halden is the hero. No pressure. And if he does not? Well, there went my optimism. There was no good answer, so I gave her the true one. Then I hold it. Maybe it's my peak moment of delusion, but hey, optimism. Isolde grabbed my coat and kissed me once, hard and fierce, in the middle of smoke and shouting. Right in the chaos, nothing like a romance subplot to spice things up. That was not permission to die, she said. Noted. I'll just jot that down in my life lessons notebook. I understood the nuance. That's my excuse. It's all about interpretation. She ran. I climbed the inner platform as Ashford's third assault reached the gate. Here it goes. Time to shine. My gift opened wider than ever before. Spontaneous power surge. Fantastic. Every defender became a constellation. Tavi's speed, Nessa's pattern sense, Oric's awareness of ground pressure, Morel's impossible accuracy, Mara's calm, Halden's command. None of them needed me to make them greater. They needed connection. Just like a really awkward group hug on a battlefield. I reached not into one person, but between them. Connecting people like a human Wi-Fi router. The catalyst affinity answered. Power move activated. Pain tore through me. Oh great, and I was feeling so good about things. For several heartbeats, Last Ditch moved as one living thing. Not controlled, not obedient, but aware. Wow, teamwork makes the dream work. Tavi knew where Morel needed stones before she asked. Oric felt the gate brace shift and shouted before the timber split. Nessa saw an enemy captain glance toward a ladder and cut the fastening rope first. Halden adjusted the line at the exact instant Mara's fire team cleared the path. I had not increased anyone's strength, just removed the delay between trust and action. So basically, I'm a motivational speaker now. The cost burned through my vision. Blood ran warm from my nose. My knees struck the platform. Well, okay, maybe I overdid it a bit. Still, the gate held. All right, checkpoint. Then Halden fell. Of course, the hero can't have a moment of peace. A spear entered beneath his ribs during the final push. He broke the shaft, killed the man holding it, and continued giving orders until the western line closed. Now that's dedication. Ashford's soldiers retreated when Isolde returned from the North Road with captured cavalry banners and 40 riderless horses. Bet that commander didn't see that coming. Surprise. Their commander had expected frightened civilians. He found archers in the trees, evacuation wagons positioned as barricades, and Isolde Marrow personally explaining the cost of underestimating her. A breakdown of services? 100%. By sunset, the Duke's army withdrew beyond the valley. We had won. Victory dance time. No one cheered. Because of course, why celebrate when you can stew in silence? Halden sat against the rebuilt watchpost, one hand pressed to his side. Blood darkened his coat. Mara knelt beside him, but her face told me before her words could. Here comes the news I didn't want to hear. I sat in the mud. This is fine. Everyone loves a good mud bath, right? Halden looked toward the palisade. Eastern wall still leans. Here we go again. You have complained about that wall for a year. Maybe it's a really passionate love-hate relationship. Because it leans. Fair point. We will fix it tomorrow. Another day, another wall. He smiled faintly. You will assign someone competent. That's rich coming from you. I assigned you. Well, my life choices are clearly top-notch. That was your first mistake. Burn. No, my first mistake was the purse. This is perhaps 7th. Well, I almost made it to 10. His laugh turned into a cough. Classic Halden. I took his hand. The threads around him were fading. Instinct screamed at me to reach, push, spend whatever remained of myself. There was no barrier to break. No unused potential. Only a life arriving at its end. My power could not bargain with that. Sometimes, reality bites. I am sorry, I said. Halden's fingers tightened around mine. For what? The classic question. For giving you a wall instead of peace. Womp womp. You gave me a watch. His breath came shallow, first thing in years that needed me tomorrow. Around us stood the people he had trained, insulted, protected, and taught to remain when fear said run. It was worth it, he whispered. And just like that, emotion hits. Then, he was gone. Ugh, cue heartbreak. I wanted to leave before anyone saw me break. Instead, I stayed beside him. Because that's what we do. Tavi knelt on my left. Nessa on my right. Mara bowed her head. One by one, the others gathered, until grief became something we carried in public. Suddenly, I'm part of a support group. That was the hardest decision I made all day. Not the wall, not the cavalry. Staying where people could see that I had no answer. Late that night, I walked beyond the eastern field. Isolde found me beneath the old signal tree. Just like a movie. She sat without speaking. For a long time, the settlement behind us made small sounds of survival. Hammers, low voices, someone crying inside a hut. The soundtrack of life. I thought if I planned far enough ahead, I said, I could make the cost land on me instead. Because I'm a control freak. You tried. Well, A for effort. I made everyone part of a design because designs do not surprise you by dying. Totally makes sense. Isolde's shoulder touched mine. People are not walls, Ryan. Ryan. Noted. I know Amware. You know now. Thanks for the crash course. The distinction hurt because it was true. She looked toward Halden's tower. I did not stay because you needed my blade. One more mystery solved. No? I stayed because this was the first place I found that was not built around running from the next betrayal. And, because you kept looking at broken people as if broken were not the most important thing about them, touche. I turned toward her. For once, I did not read her threads. I did not search for what she might become, or what wound shaped the moment. I saw only Isolde, tired, blood on her sleeve, fear and love held without disguise. That's some poetic imagery. I love you, I said. Just like that, boom. The words felt less like a declaration than surrendering a weapon. Her eyes closed briefly. You choose terrible timing. Probably not my strong suit. I had a better speech for spring. You know, when it's sunnier and less chaotic. Of course you did. Then I looked at Last Ditch, at Halden's repaired tower, Oryx Fields, Morel's school, Tavi arguing with Nessa over gate duty, Bram hauling timber under Mara's supervision. Isolde standing beside me, not behind. My name was never yours to return, I told the envoy. Keep the title, recognize the settlement. He stared. That sounds like an administrative problem. By spring, Last Ditch held a royal charter as a free frontier township. No duke could tax us without council approval. Every resident, regardless of rank, could hold land after a year of service. The Obelisk records remained, but no guild could deny apprenticeship by letter alone. It was not a revolution. It was a beginning with paperwork, which is how the dangerous ones often look. The foreign rider arrived during our first census. His seal carried a silver sun I did not know. He dismounted before the gate, bowed, and addressed me as Catalyst Sovereign. I asked him not to do that again. He informed me that, beyond Ardenval, other kingdoms had heard of the E-rank exile who built power by awakening the discarded. Their courts were frightened. Their unwanted people were not. They would like to meet you, he said. Beyond him, more riders appeared on the horizon, beneath unfamiliar banners. Isolde slipped her hand into mine. What did we just start? She asked. I watched the road fill with strangers carrying broken crowns of their own. A larger administrative problem, I said. She groaned. And that is how the weakest man in Ardenval lost a title, found a home, and accidentally became important to several foreign governments. I would like to say matters became calmer after that. They did not. There were rival catalysts, offended kings, one deeply unreasonable dragon, and a diplomatic banquet that ended with Nessa stealing a crown for educational purposes. So if you want to hear how I survived the consequences of giving unwanted people somewhere to stand, subscribe and ring the bell. I promise the Eastern Wall will still be leaning when you return.